Hello everyone. In this lesson we are going to understand URL routing. That means we are trying to understand what is URL routing, how to create multiple routes, etc. So URL routing is the process of creating routes in the MVC application. A route is a map between the URL and a controller. So with this specific URL, this specific controller should execute. That mapping is done by URL routing. In case if the URL routing is not done, even though we have entered the URL, it won't call any controller, so overall you will not get any output. So that is the reason URL routing is required in your application. The route defines one specific syntax of the URL, a specific pattern of the URL. And it may include some constant values and parameter values. The constant values are called as literals. For example, hello is an example of the constant. And product ID is an example of parameter. So because the product ID may be anything at execution time. For example, it can be 101 or 102, whatever it is. The set of routes will be stored inside the route table. The route table will be initialized on the first request, and for each subsequent request, system will check whether the actual URL of the browser is matching with any one of these routes or not. If the URLs are matching, then only it will go to relevant controller with relevant action method. If all the URLs are not matching, then it will send HTTP 404 error as response. But it will follow top to bottom approach for the URLs. In case if for the same URL multiple routes are matching, only the first one will be taken because of the top to bottom approach of the checking of URL. To create the routing, the syntax is like this. First we have to import the namespace system.web.mvc namespace, and the actual statement is system.web.routing.routetable.routes.MapRoute method. The MapRoute method is containing four arguments. First one is route name, four arguments. First one is route name, second is URL, third one default values, fourth one constraints. The route name will be unique name of the route. It can be any route name, but it will be only stored in the route table. It has no effect in the actual URL. But the second argument is the URL that is having exact impact on the browser. So whichever the URL pattern we have defined in the second argument, same URL pattern we have to follow in the actual browser URL. For example, the URL is ABC. We have to enter ABC in the browser also. Then only it will match. The third argument is default values. That means in case if you have a parameter and you can provide a default value for that parameter. So if you don't supply the value for that parameter, automatically this default value will be taken. For example, we have a parameter called product ID and we have mentioned the default value 101. When we don't supply the value for the product ID, the default value 101 will be automatically taken. In case if you supply the value for the product ID, then the value will be taken whatever you supply really. At that time the default value will not be taken. The fourth argument is the constraints. The constraints means the syntax or pattern of the parameter. We can really give regular expressions as a constraints. The regular expression indicates, okay, here in this parameter I am accepting only numerical values, here only date values, here only alphabetical value, etc. If the constraints also matching, then only the route will be accepted and the corresponding controller will execute, otherwise it will not execute. In one application, we can create any number of routes. All the routes are stored in the route table, will be checked for each request of the application. This is how the URL routing works. So we have understood URL routing. In the further lessons, we will understand practically how to work with all these URLs, the URL routing, the parameters, constraints, all these things. Meet you in the next video.